What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Life of a Car Guy podcast. I'm your host, Pete, the Car Guy. Appreciate y'all joining me on such a beautiful Saturday morning. We moving, we grooving. We got a whole lot to share today and some exciting news to share as well. Speaking of moving and grooving, you know how we do. We're going to kick this off with the What's Going On segment. Talk to me so you can see, oh, what's going on. What's going on? Yeah, what's going on? What's going on? So, speaking of what's going on, we've got our Take the Wheel segment number 3 locked down. We're going to be interviewing a lifelong friend of mine and an avid car lover, Jarvis Atkins. Jarvis hails from the Virginia Beach area, and we're going to do a GoPro cam interview in one of his sports cars. So he currently owns 2 red sports cars. One is a C7 Corvette. The other is a mid 90s Dodge Viper. That one I cannot wait to see. I think we're going to be able to test drive that one. He's been restoring that and getting it ready, and I believe it is drivable now. So we are ready to roll with that. And I'm going to have a GoPro cam attached on the inside of the dashboard, and we're going to kind of do a interview right inside the car as we're driving around. So I'm really, really looking forward to that. I think that's going to be exciting and it's going to be a lot of fun. Can't wait to share that one with you. So look forward to that. That's going to be at the end of this month, the last weekend of the month. So I'm looking forward to doing that. And I'm so excited about that one. But anyway, the second Take the Wheel segment that we're scheduled to do with Mr. Hicks, that will probably take place tomorrow afternoon. I know Mr. Hicks has got a slight schedule conflict, so we'll see. Believe we may be able to do that tomorrow. If not tomorrow, we'll get that done next weekend. So just to kind of give you guys a heads up on that. All right. Also, continue to check out the website, www.lifeofacarguy.com. Appreciate you guys looking at that and checking out the blogs. Really appreciate that. Continue to leave comments and like and subscribe to that as well as to the channel. So let's get started with the industry's news. Another great nostalgic return. Nissan has decided that they're going to focus on creating a sports car lineup and bring back some of the old familiar names that they used to have before. So that's wonderful news. I'm so glad to share that with you guys. Richard Chandler, and he is the one that's in charge of the global product strategy review for all of Nissan, especially in the US. He has stated that they're going to focus on filling out the sports car line through Nissan. One of which I had to do some research on this one because I don't remember seeing this when I was growing up. One of this is going to be the Nissan Silvia. This is a caption or a picture of one I saw online. The Silvia was kind of a slight rendition and an adaptation of the older Skyline model. And they're thinking about bringing back that nameplate as well. So, they currently have the Nissan Z, which is a throwback to a combination of the Z and the Datsun style that used to be way back in the day. And of course, they've got the Skyline GTR, which is a high-powered muscle car, beautiful car. But man, that thing moves for real. I had a chance to actually take a ride in one of those. It is really, really awesome. So they're thinking about building that product line out as well. One of the things that they're focused on with this and kind of like I'm kind of glad that there's an emphasis on this is making sure that the pricing models are going to match and it's going to be compatible with accessibility in terms of price. So that's a big, big deal. And I'll tell you why in a second. But Nissan is also going to streamline their product line down as well, too. They currently have a total of 56 models. They're going to bring that down to 45. And they're also going to reintroduce and bring back the Nissan Xterra. So that's going to be really exciting as well, too. And basically what they're going to do is kind of carve out 3 different segments that their vehicles are going to fit in. So they're going to kind of make it a little bit more streamlined and efficient and also kind of have some space to kind of have some products and projects some pet projects that they're going to focus on as well too. So I'm really glad to hear this. And let me tell you a couple of my personal opinions with this. One of the things that I remember growing up was the diversity of creativity that a lot of the Japanese cars had back in the day. The Hondas had like the Prelude and the Del Sol. I remember those vehicles. And then Toyota had the Supra and a couple other models. And of course, Nissan had the Z and the 240. Those were really, really cool models, just to kind of name a few. And one of the things I was kind of disappointed in this streamlined process that automakers have gone to with respect to just kind of being like run of the mill with sedans and SUVs, in my opinion, kind of lost that creativity. Now, the models have kind of been reintroduced over the years. I know Acura has brought back the Integra, which, in my personal opinion, it's the exact same thing as the Honda Civic. The the Supra came back. That was really, really nice. But the price point on that was kind of really high and didn't really give a whole lot of differentiation there. And then, of course, Honda brought back the Prelude. Now, the Prelude, I like the look of it, and I like the fact that they kind of made it into a hybrid and kind of differentiated that. But the price point, again, is just so far out of market that a lot of people are kind of priced out with those. So I'm glad that Nissan is going to have a focus on price accessibility when they're making their sports car lineup. I think that's going to really help and kind of reintroduce themselves back to the market. And for those of us like the Gen Xers and everybody that's a little bit older than me, a little bit younger than me that remember those models, hopefully they're going to kind of reintroduce those back and make them a little bit more affordable. So we'll see how that goes. I can't wait to see that. I think that's going to be really awesome. So let's talk about the topic of discussion today. So last week we did the pre-finance of the car buying process, right? And then before then we talked about the recon, research, and reviews. So today we're going to talk about first date or test drive. All right. So this one is kind of near and dear to my heart because as a sales consultant, this is when I first meet the client, right? And that's us. That's you. All right. This is how you're coming out looking at vehicles and you're ready to kind of see what's out there, see what you really like, and put the pedal to the road, so to speak, and actually test drive what you're interested in. So, a couple of things we're going to kind of discuss. We're going to look at locations and options. We're going to kind of dispel some common myths about test drive and what you should do. We're going to do our own checklist for our test drives as well. And we're going to talk about test drive options, return policy, and mechanic review. Okay. So, all of these are really good starting points and a good guide, if you will, in terms of initiating the test drive process. All right. So, biggest thing when we talk about locations and options is where are you going to look at your vehicles? So, back on the previous segment, we were talking about the recon and research and review. One of the things I want to stress to make life a little easier and less stressful is to kind of have a review of what you're interested in before you start test driving. Now, it used to be back in the day, of course, before the invention of the internet and having access on your cell phones to kind of look at things. It used to be that the best way to kind of check out and do your research is to go from dealership to dealership and test drive an assortment of cars. That's not the most productive way of doing it anymore. And a lot of the information is kind of readily available at your fingertips on your computers or even on your cell phone. So the goal of this here before you test drive is to kind of make sure you got your research in play and kind of have an idea of what you're looking for. So when we talk about locations, we're talking about what we have done in terms of finding vehicles that we're interested in, and that comes from shopping online. Okay, so there are a lot of different dealers that are out there, new car and pre-owned dealers that are out there, and there's so many to choose from. But basically, what I would suggest that you do is focus on the vehicle or vehicles that you're interested in and find out where they are locally to you. Now, if you're shopping for a vehicle that's really, really hard to find and you find yourself having to travel, just make sure that you're locked in and you know that that vehicle is not only readily available, but you know that that's the one or the series of ones that you're interested in. One, okay? So the biggest proponent of locations and options is meeting your consultant. All right. That's your salesperson. So typically, when you go to a location, you're either assigned to a salesperson or you just happen to walk up and meet someone that's available. What's really important is that you find someone that's engaging, that is listening to what your needs are, and also providing you sound feedback that's not just bias. Okay. So, most really good consultants out there are going to kind of tell you how we're going to start the process, what we're expecting to accomplish, get an idea of what your needs and wants are, and kind of tailor make those recommendations to fit your needs. Okay. That's a mark of a true, solid, and really, really reliable consultant. All right. Now, once you've got your strategy and plan all set out, that's when you set up for the test drive. All right. Now, a couple of things I would just tell you to be prepared to have. And some of us kind of forget about this because it's so commonplace for some and may not be for others. Always make sure you, A, have your physical driver's license ready and available, and two, a copy of your auto insurance card. Now, there are some places where they ride with you, so insurance may or may not be needed. But if they let you do test drives alone, that's usually something that they're going to want. And it's always good to have an updated current insurance card, and also kind of self-spoken for, make sure your license is the current license and it's the up-to-date one. Okay. So, and common myths about test drives, you know, talking to a lot of consultants and a lot of clients, one of the things that is a really, really big myth is that you have to test drive an assortment of vehicles before you can make a decision. That's not true. That really isn't true. For most people, I have found that no more than 3 test drives of 3 different vehicles is all that's really needed. If you're finding that you're having to do more than that, what I would recommend is kind of going back to the drawing board and kind of getting an idea of what you're really focused on and what really is what piques your interest, not just in wants and desires, but also for what you need. And the other thing too is that another common myth is that you have to go to multiple locations before you can make a decision. That's also not true. A lot of times, what I've found is that most clients, about 90%, usually the first car they drive, typically, assuming that there are no issues or any concerns, as well as that fits and feels right, they typically find that the first car they drive is the one that they end up purchasing. So don't be alarmed by that. Don't feel bad about that. And certainly don't feel like you're not doing enough due diligence. So a lot of times, if you find the right one and it feels right to you, go for it. There's no harm in that. Okay. Now, obviously, if it doesn't feel right and something's seems a little off, and you make that apparent and make your sales consultant aware of that, don't be sad or don't be disappointed if you need to kind of reconsider a different option. That's okay. There's so many cars out here, new and pre-owned, that are available to us. I remember one stat I read a few years back. For every one person, there's probably about 50 or 60 different options available. Okay. So that being said, that doesn't mean you have to drive 50 or 60 different options. Okay. I want to make that very, very clear. Do not do that. You're going to wear yourself out. Don't do that. Typically, I would stay within about 3, no more than 3. Okay. One other myth, and we kind of just touched on this, is that most people will go in with the mindset of, I will not find the option that I want on my first visit. I have to tell you, in the business, I've seen so many times where that is just not true. Now, for some people, if they look at something and they find that's not the right fit, that's okay. But I would say, going back to my statement, over 90% find out the very first option that they test drive is the option that they end up getting. So, once again, don't feel bad about that at all. Okay. Now, you're in the test drive, you're ready to go, regardless if you're riding with your consultant or you're riding on your own. There is a series of checklists that I want all of my car guys and gals to make sure that they do. And checklist number one is you want to make sure that you're reviewing all the options on the vehicle. Okay. First thing, and sometimes I've found this especially on the pre-owned car markets, even though they may display a lot of information online on that specific car, a lot of times those options are the pre-filled options that could or could not be on the vehicle. So always make sure if there are specific options that you're looking for, make sure that vehicle has them upon arrival. Okay. I remember one time I was working with a client and he was looking at a Lexus GX 460. And one of the things he was really, really focused on was making sure it had heated seats and cooled seats. Now, my understanding, if it's a Lexus, I would have thought those features are standard. In that case, it wasn't, because the particular model that was brought in for him did not have heated and cooled seats. You would think that would be a standard, but that's not always the case. So I always tell my clients, if there's certain options that they're looking for, let's go out and verify to make sure that they are on the vehicle, regardless if it's a new or pre-owned car. Okay, that's thing number one. Speaking of options, when you're in the vehicle, it's important to check out and make sure everything works, especially on a pre-owned vehicle. Now, for most cases, a lot of pre-owned dealers have their own checklists of what they do to verify the vehicle, or some of them have certifications that they do to make sure they meet what's required. There are times where I've found, even in the various locations that I've worked, that there may be an option that may not function to the requirement of the client, and it may be something that may not work on the car. So it's very important that you check that. And common things that I kind of mention on those obviously are the lights, radio, that's important. One that kind of gets overlooked sometimes is the sunroof. So I would always tell you, if the vehicle has a sunroof and you obviously plan on using the sunroof, test it out. Make sure it works properly. Make sure there aren't any kind of hiccups with it, or it doesn't stutter or stop when it's not supposed to, and make sure it closes evenly and those kinds of things. Rear view camera, that's another one that I always kind of point out. Sometimes, especially on pre-owned cars, especially if they're a little bit older, sometimes the screen may be a little bit fuzzy or may have some little difficulty with it in terms of visibility. You want to make sure that the rear view camera, when it comes on, it's clear. Okay, if it's fuzzy, if it doesn't really show a lot, that's a situation where it needs to be fixed prior to purchase, in my professional opinion. Windows are another one. I always say check all the windows. If you have a convertible, make sure the convertible top works properly and opens and closes as it should. Locks are important. You want to check to make sure all the door locks are functioning as they should. And another one, this is especially for the newer cars that have the Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, or supposedly they're advertised to have that. When you come for the test drive, make sure you have your own wire connector, just to make sure that when you plug it in, those operations come up automatically. Sometimes there are going to be vehicles that have the wireless option for Android Auto and Apple CarPlay. Definitely make sure that that works as well before you test drive. That's something that's really, really important. I think a lot of people who use that find that that's a very, very useful tool, and it kind of keeps your hands free from having to do a lot of control manipulations and taking your hands off the steering wheel. So I would make sure when you come for your test drive, have a compatible cord, USB and USB-C available, just on the chance that it's not wireless and you need to plug your phone in. Okay. So those are some of the main checklist items that I would talk about. Now, let's talk about test drive options. So there are some dealers out there that have a segmented test drive set up, where they let you test drive 15 minutes, 20 minutes, sometimes an hour, sometimes a couple of hours. There are even those that have a 24-hour test drive option. So if you're not committed to a vehicle, I would recommend not doing a 24-hour test drive. And here's why. What I've found in my studies with this is that 24-hour test drives are really made for when you actually find the model that you want. And I'm not talking about the type of vehicle, I mean the specific car, everything. And let's say you have a relative that you're carting around. You want to make sure that they fit in and out of the vehicle. Maybe they're not available. That's a good reason to do a 24-hour test drive. If you have a specific commute, that's important, and you want to make sure the car functions throughout that commute in a certain way. That's another great reason. One, for most vehicles, regarding like your garages and being able to fit in a garage, most vehicles are going to fit cleanly in most garages. That includes the 1.5 and the 2 car garage. But if you need to see how it fits and feels as you're going in and out and making sure that you feel comfortable coming in and out of your garage or your driveway, that's another important one. And then one other would be for family oriented situations, like if you have children and you need to see how the vehicle is going to feel with your children if they're not available for the test drive at the dealer. Those are all really good test drive options for overnight. If you're just feeling out a vehicle and you just want to test drive multiple cars, I would not do that on a 24-hour test drive. I think you get enough out of that on a standard test drive, my professional opinion. And I would just, like I said, reserve the 24-hour test drive for the one. Okay. Test drive routes. So a lot of dealers may have a segmented test drive route that they recommend. Within that segmented route, one of the things that I think is very important is to make sure you're able to use the vehicle to the fullest, and that's doing multiple different types of turns. So like left turn, right turn, that's important. Being able to go into an open car lot, maybe putting in reverse and looking at the vehicle kind of around, that's also very important too. So another thing with a test drive when you're driving a vehicle, one of the things that I always kind of segment and tell people to do is as you're driving, kind of check the rear view mirror, see if you see anything. I remember doing a test drive when I was younger, and I looked in the rear view and I saw like white smoke coming up, and I was making sure that that wasn't another vehicle that was in and around me. And kind of seeing those things, that's very important. You just kind of want to make sure that you're not seeing anything that seems a little strange or funny. Also, you also want to make sure you get a good feel of the vehicle. Okay. When you're driving, especially out on the highway, I think it's important if you have the radio on, it's a good idea to turn it off because you want to listen to see if you hear or feel anything at certain varying speeds. So typically at a speed of around 55 to 60, that's normally where you can tell if it has a high speed balance or not. And those high speed balances, if it doesn't have it, you'll feel like a noise or a vibration. That typically means that it needs to be balanced for higher speeds. Another thing I would do on a test drive is gently, you don't have to slam them, but gently test the brakes and make sure you're not feeling any heavy vibrations or any kind of feel underneath the seats. That typically means that the brake pads are warped or the rotors may need to be resurfaced or replaced. So those are certain ones, basic examples to make sure you review. Return policy. This one is very important that you kind of cover on the test drive. I would do that on the test drive first before you get to the table and you start, negotiating or going through the finance process. The reason why is because you want to make sure that while you're test driving the vehicle, if there is something that may be under question and the dealer is promising that they'll take care of, like a WIO or whatever, you want to make sure that you're aware of what the return policy is within that time frame. Because typically, what I found, especially on both sides of the table, you want to make sure that whichever vehicle that you're interested in or that you like, and if there's an issue with it and you agree to take it upon getting that taken care of, you want to make sure that that's taken care of and that doesn't go fall outside the return policy guideline. Okay. Dealers now kind of focus a little bit more of a return policy to give people a little bit more buyer's remorse protection. Some dealers will do a 3-day, some 7, some 10. There were dealers that did as high as like a 30-day return policy. So just get an idea of what the location that you're working with and what they have. If they don't have a return policy, I'm not saying don't deal with them per se, but I would just kind of, take note of that and maybe kind of gauge your feel on that and what you're comfortable with. If you prefer that you have a return policy in place, and I got to be honest with you, most people do, especially myself, and if they don't offer one, it might be a good idea to maybe consider a different option somewhere else. Okay. No harm in that. It's just important to know what your options are. Um, Finally, with regards to mechanic review, this one's really important because, especially if you're looking at a pre owned vehicle, let's say you're doing a test drive and you're offering to say, well, can I do something in contingent of doing a mechanic review? If the dealer works with you on that and says you're allowed to take the vehicle to set it up for a mechanic review, just make sure you understand what the stipulations are with that. Sometimes dealers are not going to hold a car for you to set that appointment up. Sometimes they'll say the mechanic review needs to happen after the test drive. Just get an idea of what that involves and what that's like, and that kind of goes along with the return policy as well. So if you schedule the mechanic review at after the point of sale, and that's within a return policy, make sure you get that mechanic review within that time frame of the return policy, so you're not obligated for any kind of situation as well. Okay. One other thing I will say with regards to mechanic review, always get an idea of what the service history of that vehicle was. Typically nowadays, that's going to come into the form of like a Carfax report or an Experian auto check, whichever the dealer provides. Make sure you see that up front and make sure you give that a thorough review. Okay, that's very, very important. Also, if you purchase the vehicle and or do the mechanic review prior to purchase, make sure you have a copy of that with you to kind of share with your mechanic so that they can kind of balance back and see, okay, I see that this actually was done and that's actually can be verified. Okay. Another thing that's very important is what coverage is on the vehicle as it sits. Okay. Typically, dealers, especially on used cars, they'll have some kind of 30-day warranty, maybe a 90-day warranty. Get an idea of exactly what that covers and also understand the specifics if something is not repairable within that time frame. So the last thing you want to do is kind of be stuck with the vehicle if it has some problems that come up after purchase and you're kind of seeing them after the fact. You want to make sure that the dealer is going to cover not just the mechanics, but the electronics and everything else. Some things that aren't going to be covered are going to be more wear and tear, like tires. So if you run on a pothole and a tire bursts, that may or may not be covered under the dealer coverage. Windshields are an important one. That's one that I've seen very often. So if you're driving your vehicle and a rock kicks up and you get a rock chip on your windshield and your windshield all of a sudden splits into a crack, typically dealers won't cover that. So that's something I would just kind of get an idea of and make sure that you have insurance coverage that's going to cover windshield repair at the time of purchase. Okay. Another one would kind of be like dents or dings. So obviously, the one that I hate the most, you just bought your car, you park in the parking lot, and somebody opens up their door and they ding your car. Those are kind of things that aren't going to typically be covered by a dealer warranty, but kind of get an understanding of what is. And obviously, at the time when you're negotiating, that's a great time to talk about additional coverage. Okay. So that's pretty much it for that segment three of the car buying process from the car guy. So let's talk about drop a dime. So I appreciate you guys continuing to reach out to me via the emails and everything. Thank you for continuing to do that. That's great. Continue to send me those as well. And one other thing, just to kind of mention with respect to the website and the blogs, continue to check it out. The subscription base has definitely been growing, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate you guys doing that. One more thing about checking that out is definitely if you know someone that would be interested in checking out the podcast, please tell them to check it out and like and subscribe there as well too. Okay. All right, guys. So we're going to go ahead and sign off. And thank you so much for being a part of this thing of ours. And because like I said, and I've been saying before, this is our thing. And we want to make sure that we make it as enjoyable and as inclusive as we can from those who are just beginning to start off and kind of get an idea of what cars are all about to those that are the experts and mechanics and want to definitely share their input and advice as well too. So open for everyone and anyone of all ages. Okay. So thank you so much for being a part of that. So once again, guys, I just want to tell you that I appreciate you riding with me. And I just want to say praise God, because without him, I cannot do this thing. And because of that, I always let him take the wheel. And even though we may not always agree, it's important that we respect one another. Okay? So stay up. I'll see you on the road.